Michael Imhotep. It is Wednesday, October 14th, 2020, and we are live. We're here on our daily show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time, and we're also still here every Sunday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the African History Network show with Michael Imhotep. Hope everybody's doing well today. Well, today was the last day of the hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett to confirm her on the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll talk some about that. On Tuesday, October 13th, she got a grilling from Senator Kamala Harris. We have a clip of that we're going to share with you. I watched a lot of it. It was I've been tuning in and out, and when I'm on the road, I'm listening to it also. So I hear her doing a lot of dodging as well. There's some good analysis on the Readout with Joanne Reed. She had Ellie Mastal on Tuesday also, so we may be able to share that clip with you as well. But we'll talk some about that, and we need to also look at one of the things Senator Kamala Harris did was she entered the letter from the NAACP in opposition to the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. On yesterday's show, we shared the letter that President Derrick Johnson, president of the NAACP and executive director, wrote in opposition to her nomination. All right, so on today's show, we'll talk a little bit about what happened the past couple of days with Amy Coney Barrett. We have a update also dealing with coronavirus as well. And we're at 7.9 million cases in the U.S., 216,000 deaths, no national plan. It looks like they're really pushing herd immunity. I posted some articles about that today on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. So follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, on YouTube also. Okay. Then we also see this story. I posted this on our fan page, the African History Network. It got 1,000 likes. Twitter suspends accounts for posing as Black Trump supporters. Twitter suspends accounts for posing as Black Trump supporters. We'll discuss that. You know, there was a huge disinformation campaign in 2016 coming out of Russia, led by the Internet Research Agency, and I've talked about that extensively. I saw the disinformation campaign in 2016 as it was taking place. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about this story coming from the Guardian, out of the UK, and then. We are 20 days away from the presidential election. More than 14 million people have already voted early. We see, and this is according to the United States Election Project, okay? And this is a huge increase over this time in 2016. You're dealing with somewhere around a 600% increase. TheHill.com has some good reporting on that, so we'll discuss that also on today's show. And then when we look at this date in history, October 14th, 1964 is the anniversary of Dr. King winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, the Nobel. Now, contrary to what Donald Trump calls it, it's not the Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel meaning good, N-O-B-L-E. It's not the Nobel Peace Prize, it's the Nobel Peace Prize, N-O-B-E-L. Okay, Nobel is named after the man who founded the Nobel Peace Prize. That Donald Trump doesn't understand that for some reason. So anyway, so we'll discuss those topics, and we'll also continue our fact checking dealing with Senator Kamala Harris and her prosecutorial record. Okay, last night we dealt with marijuana prosecutions, and we looked at the fact checking coming from Mercury News. They have a very extensive article I posted it on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, a few days ago. It got 800, probably almost 1,000 likes by now. It contradicts and refutes a lot of this nonsense that you see floating around on social media. A lot of these memes that cite no sources. Okay, a lot of these memes cite absolutely no sources. You don't know where the information came from. You don't even know who created the meme. And I see the same meme just floating around. She sent 1,500 black men to prison on marijuana convictions. Cite no sources, anything like that. And when we looked at the article from PolitiFact.com that fact checked the accusations that Representative Tulsi Gabbard made on the debate stage, and we talked about this also. PolitiFact.com, where Tulsi Gabbard's attacks on Kamala Harris' record as a California prosecutor on target. Okay. Well, Tulsi Gabbard said that she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations. 1,500 people in jail. Tulsi Gabbard did not mention race or gender. So how did 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations, how did that translate to 1,500 black men? Where did that come from? Did the people who created that meme even live in the U.S.? So we'll talk about Dr. King winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, what's interesting, and I've done lectures dealing with Dr. King. We just interviewed Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, who's a nephew of Dr. Leonard Jeffries, one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Well, we just interviewed Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries a couple months ago, dealing with the passing of John Lewis and the comments that Bill Clinton made at John Lewis' funeral in reference to Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, and the shift in the civil rights movement, because the Black Power movement comes out of the civil rights movement. Okay, the Black Power movement comes out of the civil rights movement, and it comes out of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and with SNCC, you're going to have a shift in 1966, and Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael becoming the chairman of SNCC, and Black Power the Black Power element was already in SNCC, but it's really going to take over. And people like John Lewis, Diane Nash, others who are not with the Black Power movement are going to leave SNCC. So, one of the things that is interesting here when we look at Dr. King and winning the Nobel Peace Prize is that he was influenced by Mohandas Gandhi from India. Well, a lot of people don't know that Gandhi did not like African people. Gandhi had a history of saying very negative things regarding African people. Okay, and there was a book that came out in 2015 by two South African university professors that talked about this as well. So we'll talk some about Dr. King winning the Nobel Peace Prize, but also Mohandas Gandhi, and his negative views of African people. And then also on this date in history, October 14th, 1982, Ronald Reagan declared his war on drugs. Ronald Reagan declares war on drugs. For some reason, people think mass incarceration started with the 94 crime bill. I still can't figure that out, because you skip over Richard Nixon's war on drugs, which he declared June 17th, 1971, which is really where, quote unquote, mass incarceration begins, because the U.S. prison population quadruples from 1970 to 1993. It goes from 300,000 in 1970 to 1.3 million in 1993. So how people think this starts with the 94 crime bill, if you actually understand history, I don't understand how you skip over the war on drugs, starting with Richard Nixon, June 17, 1971, declaring his war on drugs in front of Congress, asking for an increase in funding to fight the war on drugs. And you skip over October 14, 1982, and Ronald Reagan's war on drugs, Republican, and you think you just go to 94. 94 is a continuum, but I don't understand how you just skip over that. I still haven't figured that out, where people are getting this information from. So, it's just like people think African people first came to this land in 1619, August 20, 1619. August 20, 1619 did happen, but we were here for tens of thousands of years in this land before that. Even When we look at enslaved Africans, well, the Spanish were taking Africans into the territory today that's South Carolina and Georgia in 1526. That's 93 years before 1619. So, I don't understand where people get this information from, but that's why we're here. Okay, so, this is what we do. So on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now it's correct wrong behavior. We don't get our information from Facebook memes and Twitter memes and TikTok videos. We do research. Proper documentation ends all conversation. We focus on, we deal with education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828, and sign up for our email newsletter. And remember, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. And that really helps us in this expanded format where we're here 6 nights a week, 6 days a week, as opposed to 1 day a week. So that really helps to support the research and et cetera. All right. Calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. We're coming up here on a break in a few minutes here. So let's jump right into this. Now, on Tuesday, October 13th, we saw Senator Kamala Harris grill Amy Coney Barrett. When we come back from the break, we're going to share a clip of that with you. But NBC News has some good reporting on this. Trump's words haunt Amy Coney Barrett as she vows not to be a pawn on Supreme Court. Trump's words haunt Amy Coney Barrett as she vows not to be a pawn on Supreme Court. Now, it's important for people to understand, as we talked about before, 3 branches of government: legislative branch, House of Representatives, U.S. Senate; executive branch, the White House, the presidency, and the president; and then the judicial branch, the courts, the federal courts, the federal courts of appeals, the appellate court, U.S. Supreme Court. The judicial branch interprets the laws coming from the legislative branch. All right. So we know that Trump has gotten 216 federal judges confirmed in 3.5 years. 216 federal judges confirmed in 3.5 years. These are lifetime appointments. Read the article from Newsweek.com. Trump has appointed 216 federal judges, and it could be 230 by election day. Okay. All right. Now, Judge Amy Coney Barrett faced a barrage of questions from the Senate Judiciary Committee over more than 11 hours on Tuesday, October 13th, the second day of her confirmation hearing for the U.S. Supreme Court. Barrett was sharply questioned by Democratic lawmakers over her personal and judicial philosophies. She repeatedly insisted to senators that she has no agenda, quote unquote, no agenda on issues like the Affordable Care Act, okay, or also known as Obamacare, the future of abortion rights or same-sex marriage, and that she would be nobody's pawn if confirmed to the Supreme Court. Now, what's interesting is Donald Trump ran on reversing Roe versus Wade, overturning Roe versus Wade. He said he would nominate in 2015, 2016 when he was running. He said he would nominate Supreme Court justices that would overturn Roe versus Wade. He said he ran on repealing and replacing the Affordable Health Care Act, but he has nothing to replace it with. He said he would appoint Supreme Court judges to overturn the Affordable Health Care Act. This is what he ran on in 2016. This is what he's still running on. Basically, he's still running on that now. Okay, let's be honest. the future of abortion rights or same-sex marriage, and that she would be nobody's pawn if confirmed to the Supreme Court. She has a particularly tough row to hoe, given that the person who nominated her to the high court, Donald Trump, has repeatedly told Americans that his judicial picks will faithfully advance his agenda. For instance, Amy Coney Barrett declined to commit to recusing herself from a potential lawsuit contesting the result of the 2020 presidential election, even though Donald Trump has clearly stated his desire to fill the Supreme Court vacancy in the event of such a scenario. Donald Trump has said that he wants to have a Supreme Court. He wants to have 9 Supreme Court justices. He said because he thinks the results of the election could go to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it would be no good having a 4-4 tie in the Supreme Court. Okay, so. He has said this. All right, we're coming up here on a break in just a minute. So he has said this. So he's telegraphing. We know what this is about. All right, quote, I certainly hope that all members of the committee have more confidence in my integrity than to think I would allow myself to be used as a pawn to decide this election for the American people, end quote, she told Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware. We're coming up on a break. Listed the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, the future of radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by, everybody. All right, stand by, everybody. Let's switch over here. Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. All right, let me call into this through the Skype line. How's everybody doing? Got Joanna. Let's post this information here. You can donate through Cash App. Hey, Shakita. Yeah, this is Michael. I'm calling back through my Skype line. All right. Let me send you this other one. But get that one queued up from CNN because I'm gonna go. I'll introduce that one when we come back from the break. I'm gonna send you this other one too. Yeah. I'm gonna try to queue this up. Okay. All right. Thanks. Yep. Which one is this? Stand by, everybody. All right, stand by, everybody. Got a good show for you. We'll go past 1 hour. I already know that. All right, stand by. We'll be back in just a minute here.
Your family.
Okay, we're coming back from break here. Just a minute. What the fuck is it? All right, we've got okay, audio is low because we're on commercial break. You should be able to hear me. We got Christine, Erica, Willie. Okay. Cash App link. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It's Wednesday, October 14th, 2020, and we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. You can donate to the African History Network, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow. And then also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, because you can read the articles that I write. All my DVD lectures are there as well, digital downloads, etc. at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, so right before the break, we were given an update on what took place on day 2, Tuesday, October 13th, dealing with the hearing, Supreme Court hearing of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Now, on yesterday's show, we talked about Judge Myra Selby. Judge Myra Selby out of Indiana, who was on the Indiana Supreme Court. Judge Myra Selby was blocked from the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals she was nominated by President Barack Obama in 2016. And she was blocked by Republicans led by Moscow Mitch McConnell in the Senate. And when Donald Trump became president, he put Amy Coney Barrett on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. Okay, so she's in a federal appeals court seat that was stolen from an African American woman nominated by President Barack Obama. We talked about that on yesterday's show. Go watch that. All right, so let's go back to this reporting from NBC News. So she's done a lot of ducking and dodging, Amy Coney Barrett. And during day 2 of her hearing, Barrett revealed a roadmap for reversing landmark abortion and desegregation rulings as well. So let's see. Okay, so we'll try to pull that up also. I want to go to this clip here. This is from CNN, courtesy of CNN. This is part of the questioning from Senator Kamala Harris to Amy Coney Barrett, and this surrounds the Affordable Health Care Act. Okay, let's go to this clip.
Before being elected, President Trump promised that every justice he puts forward would, quote, will do the right thing, unlike Bush's appointee, John Roberts, on Obamacare, unquote. Judge Barrett, 18 months later, you criticized the Chief Justice for upholding the Affordable Care Act when you concluded, quote, Chief Justice Roberts pushed the Affordable Care Act beyond its plausible meaning to save the statute. My question is, how many months after you published that article did President Trump nominate you to be a judge on the Court of Appeal?
Senator Harris, I apologize. I don't remember the timing of that article. I was nominated, I believe my nomination to the Court of Appeals was announced in May of 2017.
That's correct.
But I don't remember when the article came out.
The article was published in January of 2017, so that would have been 5 months later. Justice Ginsburg, whose seat you are seeking to fill, provided the critical fifth vote in a 5-4 decision that upheld the Affordable Care Act. So let's lay this out for everyone who's watching. As I discussed previously, 1, Republicans have spent a decade trying to destroy the Affordable Care Act. 2, Donald Trump promised to name a Supreme Court justice and Supreme Court justices who would tear down the Affordable Care Act. 3, President Trump is before the Supreme Court right now arguing that it be struck in its entirety. 4, the Supreme Court could be just one vote away from overturning the Affordable Care Act and all of its protections, including for everyone who has a pre-existing condition or may ever get a pre-existing condition. In other words, the Affordable Care Act and all its protections hinge on this week and the outcome of this hearing. And I believe it's very important that the American people understand the issues at stake and what's at play. Judge Barrett, the day after President Trump announced your nomination to the Supreme Court, he tweeted, quote, "Obamacare will be replaced with a much better and far cheaper alternative if it is terminated in the Supreme Court," end quote. But in reality, there is no alternative that protects the millions of Americans who depend on the Affordable Care Act every day. The horrifying truth is that President Trump and the Republicans in Congress are fighting to take health care away from the American people in the middle of a pandemic, as I have said. President Trump has said that he wants to protect the American people's health care. But the reality is right now he is asking the Supreme Court to take it away, period. Senator Klobuchar, Judge Barrett, asked you earlier today but did not receive an answer. Prior to your nomination, were you aware of President Trump's statement committing to nominate judges who will strike down the Affordable Care Act? And I'd appreciate a yes or no answer, please.
Well, Senator Harris, I want to be very, very careful. I'm under oath. As I'm sitting here, I don't recall seeing those statements, but I don't recall seeing or hearing those statements, but I don't really know what context they were in, so I guess I can't really definitively give you a yes or no answer. What I would like to say is I don't hearing about or seeing such statements.
Well, I imagine you were surrounded by a team of folks that helped prepare you for this nomination hearing.
I have had. Yes.
But let me finish if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did they inform you of the president's statement that this might be a question that was presented to you during the course of this hearing?
When I had my calls with senators, it came up. Many of the Democratic senators wanted to know about the Affordable Care Act and to satisfy themselves that I had not made any pre-commitments to the president about it.
And so you then became aware of the president's statement, is that correct?
Let's see, Senator Harris, in the context of these conversations, I honestly can't remember whether senators framed the question. Perhaps so. I think from my perspective, the most important thing is to say that I have never made a commitment, I've never been asked to make a commitment, and I hope that the committee would trust in my integrity not to even entertain such an idea, and that I wouldn't violate my oath if I were confirmed and heard that case.
So just so I'm clear, and then we can move on, are you saying that you are now, before I said it, aware or not aware that President Trump made these comments about who he would nominate to the United States Supreme Court?
Senator Harris, what I was saying, I thought you initially framed the question as whether I was aware before this nomination process began. And the answer to that question,
if you are aware, were you aware before this hearing began? So
you're changing. You're asking me now whether I was aware before the hearing began.
As a follow-up question, I am. Yes.
And what I said was that when I had my calls with Democratic senators, this question came up, and I don't recall, but it may well have been that they referenced those comments in the course of those calls. Even if so, that wasn't something that I heard or saw directly by reading it myself.
All right. So that's from seeing Senator Kamala Harris gave her a grilling. I saw the whole thing. CNN has a number of clips of that, so you can check that out. Also, MSNBC.com has it as well. So she did a lot of ducking, Amy Coney Barrett. She did a lot of ducking in that line of questioning, but in others as well. That clip is entitled Kamala Harris Grills Amy Coney Barrett on Obamacare. During Judge Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court confirmation hearing, Democratic vice presidential nominee Senator Kamala Harris grilled Barrett on her knowledge of President Trump claiming he'll only appoint judges against the Affordable Care Act. Everybody knows what Trump is doing except apparently her, except Barrett. Everybody knows what Trump is doing. He said this, he campaigned on this. So I just find it very interesting, but she's playing her role. Okay. The other article here from NBC News, Barrett reveals formula for reversing landmark rulings. Barrett reveals formula for reversing landmark rulings. A day-long hearing revealed how President Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee views the susceptibility of abortion and desegregation decisions to being reversed. Okay, so check this out. This is by Jonathan Allen for NBCnews.com. Also, we'll post a link here on the thread of the broadcast. All right. Now, on yesterday, we played the clip from Elie Mystal from September 27th, 2020 on AM Joy. Elie Mystal was the first one I heard talk about Myra Selby. Myra Selby was the African-American female judge who was blocked from the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeal. She was nominated by President Obama, blocked by Republicans, and that is the seat that's the judgeship that Amy Coney Barrett now has. On the readout with Joy Reid, this would be Tuesday, okay, October 13th. They talked about some of the questioning of Amy Coney Barrett, and they talked about Senator Cory Booker. Senator Cory Booker asked Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett whether she believed every president should make a commitment to the peaceful transfer of power. Okay, there were a number of questions that she just ducked. You can look at the analysis from Washington Post. Each day, Washington Post gives 4 or 5 takeaways from this. So does NBC News and New York Times. There were a number of things that she just kept ducking. Didn't want to answer the question. Okay, let's go to this clip from the readout.
Let me first play Cory Booker's exchange, which I thought were also really strong because short declarative questions. I should probably learn to do that myself. And he really got great answers out of her. Let's look at a little bit of Cory Booker.
You condemn white supremacy, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that you said that. I wish our president would say that so resolutely and unequivocally as well. But we are at a time that Americans are literally fearful because their president cannot do that in the resolute manner in which you did. Do you believe that every president should make a commitment unequivocally and resolutely to the peaceful transfer of power?
Well, Senator, that seems to me to be pulling me in a little bit into this question of whether the president has said that he would not peacefully leave office. And so to the extent that this is a political controversy right now, as a judge, I want to stay out of it.
Do you think that the president has the power to pardon himself for any past or future crimes he may have committed against the United States of America?
That's not one that I can answer.
Ellie, she did that all day. I don't know. I'm a blank slate. I mean, this is what they do. They pretend to be a blank slate. Your thoughts?
It is not a political controversy about whether or not the President of the United States should leave office if he doesn't win election. That's not controversial. That's a simple thing. And the fact that she couldn't give a simple answer to that is easily the most terrifying and disturbing thing to come out of today. Now, I think in general, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker just showed you how you do things downtown. I know Ari is going to agree with me here. Just the existence of a yes or no question, as opposed to asking an open-ended question and screaming, but give me a yes or no answer, is so nice to see as a lawyer. And Booker and Harris both did that expertly. But Booker being able to draw blood on this issue of whether or not a judge who wants to be on the Supreme Court thinks that the peaceful transfer of power is a thing that should happen is mind-blowing to me. And then Harris said, I think, something very important as well. She finally was the one who pinned Coney Barrett down on this question of recusal. The entire day, she's been dancing a tarantella around whether or not she would recuse. And actually, it's a law. And actually, it's a statute. No, it ain't. It's one person who gets to decide whether or not a Supreme Court justice recuses. That Supreme Court justice. And Harris made her admit that it is in her sole discretion whether or not she recuses for a case, which is not just important for the ACA, which is what Harris was driving at, but it's critically important for this election where Barrett apparently doesn't think the president has to transfer power peacefully. It is critically important that the president of the United States is not allowed to pick the judge in his own re-election campaign. That should be, again, a non-controversial political opinion, and Harris made it very clear that it is Amy Coney Barrett who gets to decide if Donald Trump gets to pick his own judges in this upcoming election lawsuit.
All right, so that was from October 13, 2020. That was Elie Mystal again. I like Elie Mystal. I see I see him all the time on MSNBC. I used to read, I think he wrote for lawandcrime.com, because I do so much reading daily. I think he wrote for lawandcrime.com, but also he writes sometimes for thenation.com. If you have seen the lecture that I do called 6 Principles of Political Self-Defense, Understanding How Laws and Policies Impact the Economic Conditions of African Americans. Okay. And I deal with understanding what politics is and understanding politics as the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of law, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. And I deal with how to defend ourselves. I do a political self-defense, how to defend ourselves against these harmful policies, laws, how to fight back, etc. There's an article that Elie Mystal wrote in, I think, about September of 2019 that dealt with how Trump is changing the landscape of the federal courts. Okay. And at the time he wrote that article, Trump had gotten something like, I think, maybe 125, 130 federal judges confirmed. Now it's 216. Okay. And he's doing it with the help of the Senate. This is why Republicans work so hard to control the U.S. Senate, to maintain control of the Senate. They won control of the Senate in the 2014 midterm elections. Once again, we don't understand how all this comes together. And the courts interpret the law that are written in the legislative branch of government. So everything that we're fighting for, everything that we're protesting for, all these things, right? They can be overturned in the courts. So we don't understand that you need the courts to protect these laws that are in place. Whether it's the Affordable Health Care Act, whether it's the Voting Rights Act, whether it's if the George Floyd and Justice Act passes in the Senate, is being blocked in the Senate now. But when the new Senate comes in, if the George Floyd Policing and Justice Act passes, if it gets challenged in the courts, you got to have judges who will rule properly on this, okay, on these cases. So many of us don't understand how all this comes together. Then we see what happened yesterday, and I'm about to send you this other clip here. Shakita is our board operator, Monday through Friday. So if you call in, you'll probably talk to Shakita. Call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. All right. So if we look at what happened on Tuesday, U.S. Supreme Court ruled, once again, dealing with law, U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration is allowed to end the census count early. Well, what is the census about? It's just counting people. That don't mean nothing. Well, as I talked about on the Sunday night show, when Brother Yusuf called in and he was talking about the Electoral College, and I broke down how the Electoral College is tied to the U.S. Census, and the Electoral College was created at the Philadelphia Convention in 1787. And I asked the question, because people say the popular vote doesn't matter. I still hear people saying that, even today. All that's going on. We have 14 million people who have early voted already. TheHill.com is reporting more than 14 million Americans have cast ballots in early voting so far. We're 20 days before the November 3rd, 2020 election. The United States Election Project is reporting 14 million people have already voted. And the figure, which includes absentee and in-person early voting, represents about 10% of the total 2016 turnout. There are about 127 million people who voted in 2016. The figure, which includes absentee and in-person early voting, represents about 10% of the total 2016 turnout. Okay. 2016 turnout. In several individual states, however, a larger proportion has voted. In Vermont, 95,885 people have voted. Nearly 30% of those who voted in the state in 2016. So already 20 days before the election, 30% of the people, the 95,885 people who voted in Vermont is 30% of the number that voted in 2016. People are understanding how elections have consequences. People are understanding what happens when you have incompetent leadership in the White House. People are understanding what happens when you have incompetent leadership in the U.S. Senate, for that matter. Okay, blocking the George Floyd Police and Justice Act, blocking the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Okay, not having a consensus on a coronavirus bill between the Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives, even though Democrats in the House of Representatives passed a $3.4 trillion HEROES Act. It was about May 15th, 2020. And Republicans still haven't come to a consensus on a bill to help American people who have lost the $2,400 a month in federal unemployment insurance assistance. Okay, you need more money for testing, contact tracing, assistance. Many states are being crushed by the weight of having to pay unemployment insurance at the state level. So all this is taking place right now. And there's still no national plan for coronavirus except herd immunity. So meanwhile, in Wisconsin, South Dakota, and Virginia, turnout has reached about 25% of the last presidential elections levels. Georgia saw an increase of more than 40% from 2016 with 128,590 votes cast on Monday. The first day of early voting, according to BuzzFeed News. Texas and Kentucky also saw heavy turnout on Tuesday, October 13th, the first day of early voting. Harris County, Texas, called the 68,000 who cast their votes a record for the first day. Tuesday was also the deadline for same-day voter registration in several states, including Kansas, Oregon, West Virginia, and Virginia. Okay, so check out the rest of this at thehill.com. More than 14 million Americans have cast ballots in early voting so far. Okay, that's from October 14th, 2020. Then when we look at the census, okay, now when we look at the Electoral College, a president becomes president-elect by getting at least 270 Electoral College votes. Okay. Donald Trump became president-elect the morning of November 9th, 2016, because he exceeded 270 Electoral College votes. But the Electoral College did not vote until the first Monday following the second Wednesday in December, which fell on December 19th. You win the Electoral College votes associated with the state by winning the popular vote in the state. The popular vote in the state is tied to the Electoral College votes that a state has. Michigan has 16, Texas has 38, Maine and Vermont have 3, California has 66. All this is connected. But when you look at the census doesn't just determine an allocation of resources based upon population increases and decreases. It also, based upon population, also determines how many seats in the U.S. House of Representatives a particular state has. California is the most populous state in the union, so they have more Electoral College votes. You take the number of seats in the House of Representatives a state has, that's based upon population. You add to that number the number of U.S. senators. Each state has 2. That tells you how many electoral college votes a state has. Well, when you put an immigration question on the census, there hasn't been an immigration question on the census in about 50 or 60 years. Okay. This causes people to get scared, and you have many households where some people in the household are here legally, and other people, quote unquote, legally, because that's a whole nother conversation, because we're dealing with Europeans taking over North America from Native Americans and African people. That's a whole nother conversation. We're dealing with the violation of at least 371 peace treaties. We're dealing with the theft of land and the reallocation of land through the Homestead Act of 1862, the Southern Homestead Act of 1866. We're dealing with the reallocation of land with the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, 138 million and Black Indians, things like this, and Europeans got 2/3 of that land. So when we talk about this whole illegal stat and all that stuff, that's real tricky. Okay, especially when we look at things like the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848, and Europeans wanted to take over the entire North American continent and getting on New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada from that Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848, which ends the Mexican-American War. So that's why when the caller called in Sunday, and he's talking about illegals voting in the presidential election, I had to give him a history lesson. Is that you got to be real careful who you call illegal, because this ain't gonna turn out the way you think it is. So, so all this ties into the census, okay? And when you can reduce the count that Democratic-leaning states have by putting an immigration question on the census, you can reduce their count, which reduces how many seats in the House of Representatives states have, and then that reduces how many electoral college votes Democratic-leaning states have. That reduces their power in the electoral college and can allow Republicans to steal or win more presidential elections. Republicans have won 2 presidential elections in the past 20 years in the electoral college after losing the popular vote. Let's go quickly to this caller who we have here. Welcome to the African History Network show. We have Dwayne. Hey, Dwayne, thanks for holding. Go ahead with your question or comment. Tell us where you're calling from.
The Motor City, Detroit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
One of the things I've noticed, and is a big reason why we have such a problem with racism and oppression, and the number one reason the way to battle it is we are taught that we are inferior, and subconsciously and consciously we have this. And we fight on so many issues and raise so many issues, protests, march. But until we mainly deal with that, we can't reach the top. And we can't reach what the main objective is: total freedom. And I think one of the things I like about you, indirectly, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're showing that we're not inferior. You're teaching us our history.
Right.
And one of the things we don't know our history. And that's another thing. Other groups know their history, and they're not taught that they're inferior. There's nothing wrong with integration, but you don't integrate and give up your history, and that's what's happening.
Well, that's the foundation. Yeah, history and culture. Okay, Dwayne, keep listening, man. We're almost out of time. Thanks for calling. Yeah, African history and culture gives us our foundation. That gives us our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles, which influences our economic empowerment and our political empowerment. Very quickly here, I want to go to this other clip here. This is, we played Ellie Mistal before, so we'll deal with that tomorrow night. We played that. If you have it queued up. Yeah, let's go ahead to that. If you have it queued up, Shakita, let's go to this clip. This is Elie Mystal. Once again, he's breaking down the importance of the federal courts. Let's go to this clip here.
New York Times report. And it explains that part of the reason Trump had to sort of go rogue to find the money.
Sounds like you have 2 clips playing.
And over in 2016, the last big lender still doing business with him unexpectedly.
Hey, Shakita, you got 2 clips playing at the same time. Yeah, go to the one from AM Joy for September 27th. The one from AM Joy. play that one. It's dealing with Amy Coney Barrett. It's from September 27th from AM Joy of MSNBC. That was one of the ones that was playing, but there was two clips playing at the same time.
In a stolen seat. She is on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. She filled a seat that was nominated by Barack Obama. Barack Obama nominated a woman named Myra Selby to sit on that circuit, black woman, in 2016. Mitch McConnell blocked the black woman just like.
All right, it stopped playing. All right, we'll get that going again. Now, the Supreme Court on Tuesday effectively allowed the government to stop the census count immediately, blocking a lower court order that would have required the Trump administration to continue gathering census information in the field until the end of October. The census said it wanted to stop the count so that it could start processing the data to meet a December 31st deadline set in federal law for reporting the results to the president, Donald Trump. But the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, once again dealing with the courts, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ordered the government to keep going with its field work until October 31st, 2020, concluding that a longer time in the field would increase accuracy. In a brief unsigned order, the Supreme Court stayed the appeals court order. The decision sets up a battle for how the data collected dated by the U.S. Constitution, which is to be done every 10 years, will be used to determine the distribution of $1.5 trillion in federal aid. Politics is the legal distribution that scarce wealth, power, and resources, as well as how many congressional seats and electoral college votes each state gets. This is a fight for raw, naked power. Did that clip stop buffering? Go back to the rest of the clip if we can. All right, maybe not. Okay, go ahead.
Black woman in 2016. Mitch McConnell blocked the black woman just like he blocked Merrick Garland. And when Trump got in, he appointed Coney Barrett to Selby's seat. The Seventh Circuit, which has 11 justices now, is the only circuit that is an all-white circuit in our country. The Seventh Circuit covers Chicago. All right, so that's the scope of what we're looking at here. Trump has infused the entire federal judiciary, not just the Supreme Court, but everything up and down the federal judiciary with Trump judges, overwhelmingly white judges, overwhelmingly male judges, and we are long overdue for an expansion of those courts to better reflect the plurality and diversity of this country.
So one thing I find interesting is that the right has made this an issue for their base. This has always been what they took with them into the voting booth. The left has not. And the irony of this is that the impact that the courts have disproportionately impact folks on the left, more specifically people of color. What can we do to change the conversation and, quite frankly, the political landscape to make the courts just as important an issue on the left as they are?
Democrats have to do a much better job of messaging to their base about how important the courts are. Republicans do this all the time. Look, I do not think the base Republican voter is any smarter than the base Democratic voter. But the Republicans have made this the one-to-one connection. If you want this, then you must have the courts. If you don't like gay people, the Democrats do not message to our base way. If you want climate change, then you must have the courts. Right? If you want reasonable gun reform, then you must have the courts. If you want health care, then you must have the courts. The Democrats never make that one-to-one connection. And I think part of the problem is, frankly, arrogance. We are right. We know we're right. More people agree with us. And we think that being right and being, and being in the majority is enough to push the ball. It ain't. What's enough to push the ball is controlling this institution of minority of judges that are elected for life, that are appointed for life, and represent minority opinions. Controlling that branch is how we control these major issues that we care about.
All right. So once again, that is Elie Mystal. He was interviewed by Tiffany Cross on AM Joy from September 27th, 2020. Now, those who are teachers, play this in your class. You teach social studies, American government, American history. Name of this clip: Trump pick Amy Coney Barrett imbalances courts, more expert claims. September 27, 2020, MSNBC.com. All right. So we're out of time here. We're going to continue on our social media platforms. So those watching on Facebook and YouTube, don't go anywhere. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and on YouTube, Michael Imhotep. We're going to stay here for a little while longer. You can also donate to the African History Network, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, and PayPal.me for the AHN Show through PayPal as well. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time, and then on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace. All right. Stand by, everybody. Let me disconnect this call. All right, we're going to be here for a few more minutes so I get through these other topics here, because this 1 hour goes by quickly. Okay, so that 1 hour goes by quickly. Check this out from NBCnews.com about the census ending early. Supreme Court allows Trump administration to end census count early. It talks about the money that's distributed through the census, $1.5 trillion to the states. It talks about the connection between the census count and representation in the House of Representatives, and how that's connected to the Electoral College. All this is connected together. All right, now I want to make sure I'm going to go through all these topics we have laid out here. So just bear with me. And I'm still trying to get used to doing radio 6 days a week again, because I did it before. And so the donations help, because I don't get, just so y'all know, I don't get paid to do radio. I don't get paid from the station to do radio. So that helps us. So I don't have to keep coming out of my pocket to pay for all this stuff. All right. Update on coronavirus. So we hear that Barron Trump, Donald Trump's son, his youngest son that we know of, has coronavirus also. Barron Trump also had coronavirus, but has now tested negative along with First Lady. And that got me to thinking, did Melania Trump catch coronavirus from Donald Trump? Is that the first time she's caught something from Donald Trump? I'm just curious, because we know that according to Stormy Daniels, she had unprotected sex with Donald Trump while Melania Trump was at home with their newborn son, Barron. So we know that Donald Trump is, for lack of a better term, he's been a big whore, for a long time. He cheated on all his wives. So I'm just wondering, is this the first time she possibly caught something from Trump? Or I'm just wondering, I ain't trying to start anything. I'm just asking. But Trump says son Barron is fine after recovering from coronavirus. Leaving the White House on Wednesday, October 14th, Donald Trump said his 14-year-old son is doing well and commended Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. When we look at this reporting from the Washington Post, he said, luckily, he is a strong teenager and exhibited no symptoms. Melania Trump wrote in an online post related to released by the White House. The First Lady said, Melania, I don't call her First Lady, but anyway, Melania said she has also tested negative, and the president has tested negative according to his doctor. Now, Donald Trump on Wednesday night pointed to Barron's experience before urging students return to schools. Okay, they don't have a national policy for schools to safely open back up. And Melania Trump says she also tested negative, and Donald Trump has tested negative according to his doctor. Now, Donald Trump, on Wednesday night, he pointed to Barrett's experience before urging students return to schools. His family's recovery from the virus linked to the deaths of more than 200,000 Americans is actually 216,000 approximately right now, has only emboldened his push for a nationwide return to normalcy. You have to get the virus under control before you can send children back to school in person and get back to normalcy. Now, Treasury Secretary, in other coronavirus news, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said Wednesday, October 14th, that a new economic relief bill is unlikely before the November 3rd election. The stock market closed in the red at the end of the day's trading session as investors reacted. Scientists pushing to allow the novel coronavirus to circulate freely among healthy young people until herd immunity is reached have found a receptive audience inside the White House. But top infectious disease experts say the idea is unworkable and dangerous. For herd immunity to take place, you're looking at about 3 to 4 million people dying, for tens of millions of people, for probably, what are they talking about, maybe 200 million people being exposed and then developing antibodies, some type of immunity. Okay? It doesn't make sense. Now, U.S. coronavirus cases are rising again, sending fears that an anticipated cold weather surge in infections has arrived. 9 states, meanwhile, are experiencing double-digit increases in the number of patients hospitalized because of coronavirus complications. So, and then also yesterday we reported that more than 20 states have set records for new coronavirus infections in recent days. Since Saturday, October 10th, more than 20 states have hit a new high in their 7-day average of reported cases, and more than half of those states set records again on Tuesday, October 13th, according to data tracked by the Washington Post. Midwestern states such as Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio are driving the surge, while states farther west such as Colorado, Idaho, and the Dakotas have seen their cases rise steadily for weeks. Okay, so check out the reporting from Washington Post and NBC News dealing with coronavirus. They have live updates dealing with coronavirus. All right, now, also another good article dealing with Judge Amy Coney Barrett in the Supreme Court hearings. NBCnews.com, delayed election, mail-in ballots, and transfer of power. Barrett steers clear of Trump's strike zone. Delayed election, mail-in ballots, and transfer of power. Barrett steers clear of Trump's strike zone. This is from October 14th, 2020. All right, we'll probably talk about that tomorrow. I want to get to this other story here, and we're going to get to the fact-checking again, dealing with Senator Kamala Harris' prosecutorial record and dispel a lot of these myths floating around. We'll also talk about Ronald Reagan's war on drugs declared October 14th, 1982. There are very few people want to talk about. I haven't figured out why. Okay. And then I want to go to this next story here. And then we'll deal with Dr. King. This date in African-American history, Martin Luther King Jr. won the Nobel Peace Prize, October 14th, 1964. Twitter, you may have seen this article we posted on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. Twitter suspends accounts for posing as Black supporters. Twitter suspends accounts for posing as Black supporters. Company reports spam and platform manipulation by accounts containing identical language. This is from Tuesday, October 13th, 2020, from theguardian.com. Now, Twitter has suspended a network of accounts claiming to be owned by Black supporters of Donald Trump and his re-election campaign due to spam and platform manipulation, Twitter said on Tuesday. The company is investigating the activity and may suspend additional similar accounts if they are found to be violating its policies, a spokesperson for Twitter said. Now, the Washington Post first reported on the investigation, citing more than a dozen accounts using identical, inauthentic language, including the phrase, "Yes, I'm black and I'm voting for Trump." I think I've seen some of those dumbasses on my thread when I'm broadcasting live. A review of some of the suspended accounts shows they often used stolen images to appear real. The accounts sometimes claim to be owned by military veterans or members of law enforcement. This is not the first time Twitter has had to address a spam operation claiming to be led by black voters. NBC News also reported spam operations from fake accounts posing as black Trump supporters in August 2020. Some accounts were able to attract thousands of followers before they were suspended. One tweet, for example, amassed more than 10,000 retweets before it was removed, NBC News found. Another account allegedly used a photo of a veteran who died last month to pose as a Trump supporter. Now, polls show about 10% of African-American voters in the U.S. support Trump. These accounts raised suspicion for their identical language and stock image avatars. So for those that don't know, stock images are, you can go to different companies sell pictures that are stock images. They may have models posing for different themes of pictures, different settings. You may get pictures of animals. You may get pictures of students reading books, all different types of things like this. Stock image photos. Okay, you can get pictures of scenery. Okay, some of the pictures are free, others you pay for. Okay, iPhoto is one. I think it was Getty Images is one I use for stock photos. But you have Getty Images, you have Corbis. So there are a number of different companies that sell stock photos. Okay, so you may use them in advertisement. You may use stock photos when creating flyers. You may use stock photos for putting together videos, etc. And they have photos that are royalty free, and then they have photos that you have to pay for to be able to use. Okay, so these are stock images. So you had some people using Shutterstock as another one. Afua said, yeah, Shutterstock is another one. So the number of different companies that sell stock image photos. Okay, so you have some people that avatar, like the picture that shows up on your profile, when you make a social media post like Facebook, things like this, that avatar that shows up, they were using these stock image photos. Okay, and see, this is a deceptive practice because you still have Russian intervention. You have other countries that are setting up fake accounts and things like this, or people just setting up fake accounts. They could live here in the U.S. setting up fake accounts to deceive people. All right. So meanwhile, research shows African Americans have been negatively impacted by misinformation campaigns online in recent months, particularly those focused on spreading misinformation about COVID-19. Now, you remember early on, you had these dumbasses saying black people can't get coronavirus. Oh, really? Coronavirus, all types of nonsense about coronavirus. Okay. Quote, Black lives are consistently put in danger, and it is incumbent upon community actors, media, government, and tech companies alike to do their part to ensure that timely, local, relevant, and redundant public health messages are served to all communities. A study from Harvard's Shorenstein Center found, Shorenstein, Shorenstein Center. Now, Twitter rules prohibit using the platform in a manner intended to artificially amplify or suppress information or engage in behavior that manipulates or disrupts people's experience on Twitter, a Twitter spokesman told TheGuardian.com. The company reports campaigns discovered to be state-backed in its public archive. This month, it ran 100 accounts affiliated with Iran, Saudi Arabia, Cuba, Thailand, and Russia that had sought to spread misinformation. It did not say where it believed the network of people posing as Black Trump supporters originated or whether it was state-backed. All right, so check out this article from TheGuardian.com. Twitter suspends accounts for posing as Black Trump supporters. Man, what would be the purpose of them posing as Black Trump supporters? I don't understand why they would have to go through all those changes to do that. All right. Just a second here. All right, let's continue here. We'll post that link here. It is. Hold. Stevenson Equal Justice Initiative. They have they post about this date in history, and they have one dealing with the Ronald Reagan's war on drugs. And let me pull that up here. Dealing with Ronald Reagan's war on drugs, he declared October 18th, 82. And if you see my lecture dealing with the war on drugs, and we go back to on drugs. Stand by, everybody. Okay, can y'all hear me okay? All right, you can hear me now? Okay, good. So on October 14th, 1982, President Ronald Reagan announced plans to create 12 new drug task force units and 1,200 additional prosecutors. 1,200 additional prosecutors at an estimated cost of $200 million annually, further fueling mass incarceration, particularly in targeted Black communities. Okay. So they say further fueling mass incarceration. So this is 82. So if they're saying further fueling mass incarceration, that means, according to however they want to define mass incarceration, that means it was existing before 82. So they're not saying it started in 94. Because the war on drugs starts in 1971 with Richard Nixon, Republican, just so in case people don't remember. Estimated cost of $200 million annually. So Reagan announced plans to create 12 new drug task force units and hire 1,200 additional prosecutors at an estimated cost of $200 million annually, further fueling mass incarceration, particularly in targeted Black communities. Now, President Ronald Reagan's expansion of the war on drugs built on the actions of President Richard Nixon, who announced a drug war in 1971. Nixon officials later admitted that the president intended to criminalize Black people. And I deal with this in my whole lecture, dealing with the war on how Richard Nixon's war on drugs targeted the African American community. Now, during his 2 terms as president, Ronald Reagan tripled the federal drug law enforcement budget, hired over 4,000 additional prosecutors, tripled the number of drug cases prosecuted, and doubled conviction rates for drug crimes. This is Ronald Reagan, who was the governor of California, who signed the Mumford Law, 1969. The Mumford Law, I think it was 1969, after the Black Panthers stormed the state capitol. And that changed the law, the open carry law regarding open carrying guns into the state capitol. Okay, they changed the law because the Black Panthers learned the law and they were legally carrying, most of them legally carrying guns. So Ronald Reagan supported death sentences for individuals convicted of drug crimes and conscripted the United States military in support of drug prosecutions. When addressing the nation on the drug war, President Reagan, I hope I didn't say Nixon, it was Reagan, okay? He supported death sentences for individuals convicted of drug crimes and conscripted the United States military in support of drug prosecutions. Okay, this is all Ronald Reagan. When addressing the nation on the drug war, President Reagan used language that dehumanized people with addiction or dependency problems, calling them in a 1988 speech, quote, parasites, quote unquote, parasites and vermin who peddled toxins in government subsidized housing. Okay. This is Ronald Reagan, 1988. He called people who had an addiction or dependency problems. He called them parasites and vermin who peddled toxins in government subsidized housing. Now, drug enforcement targeted low income African American communities, other vulnerable and of states contributed to an increase in the United States and the over incarceration of African Americans. In 1980, only 25,000 people were in state and federal prison for drug violations. Today, over 300,000 people are in prison for violations of drug laws. Further, countless studies document that despite Black people and white people using drugs at similar rates, African Americans face a higher risk of arrest, pre-trial detention, incarceration, and extreme sentencing. Okay. Learn more about how the Equal Justice Initiative is working to challenge the devastating consequences of the drug war, such as extreme sentencing and high rates of incarceration. You can also look at the incarceration rates at the Bureau of Justice Statistics, BJS.gov, Bureau of Justice Statistics. All right. Okay. And I'm going to keep going here. Hopefully y'all can hear me okay. I'm going to keep going here. All right. So check out this article. We'll post a link here. This is from EJI.org, Equal Justice Initiative. Ronald Reagan expands drug war targeting Black people. This is October 14, 1982. Ronald Reagan declared his war on drugs. All right. Let's continue. Also, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com. All right. So quickly, let's look at some more fact checking dealing with Senator Kamala Harris' prosecutorial record. Yesterday we looked at marijuana convictions, and we'll look at the extensive article from mercurynews.com. Campaign fact check. Here's how Kamala Harris really prosecuted marijuana cases. This is from September 12, 2019. Campaign fact check. Here's how Kamala Harris really prosecuted marijuana cases. And they have some extensive information on this. So, okay, so let's see, look at this. Let's look at her prosecutorial policy. Despite the substantial number of convictions, many of the people who were arrested for marijuana during Kamala Harris' tenure were never locked up or never even charged with a crime, according to attorneys who worked on both sides of the courtroom. Quote, our policy was that no one with a marijuana conviction for mere possession could do any jail time at all, said Paul Henderson, who led narcotics prosecutions for several years under Kamala Harris. Defendants arrested for the lowest level possession would typically be referred to drug treatment programs instead of being charged, and weightier charges for marijuana sales would routinely be pleaded down to less serious ones, he said. Okay. Now, Nikki Solis. So yesterday we talked about Nikki Solis. Nikki Solis was a public defender, and Nikki Solis said that there is no way anyone could say that she, referring to Kamala Harris, was draconian in her pursuit of marijuana cases, said Nikki Solis, a high-ranking attorney in the San Francisco Public Defender's Office during Harris's time as DA in San Francisco. Nikki Solis also wrote this op-ed for the USA Today entitled Public Defender. I worked with Kamala Harris. She was the most progressive DA in California. Okay. Nikki Solis is a public defender on the opposite side, defending clients who are being prosecuted by Kamala Harris' office. So read this from August 10th, 2020 for USA Today. Yeah, we'll post a link to this article also. Now, Nikki Solis, who led, we go back to this article from Mercury News. Nikki Solis, who led the Public Defender's Office misdemeanor division for part of Kamala Harris' tenure, agreed that her office only rarely prosecuted people for low-level simple possession. She said, quote, Kamala Harris and I disagreed on a lot of criminal justice issues, but I have to admit she was probably the most progressive prosecutor in the state at the time when it came to marijuana, Nikki Solis said. Not all defense attorneys agree, however. J. David Nick, who represented several dozen marijuana defendants during Hallinan and Harris tenures, Hallinan was her predecessor, said he remembered Harris as more aggressive in charging marijuana sales cases than her predecessor, who was already declining to prosecute many of those arrested. J. David Nick said, quote, some of the cases that Terrence Hallinan would have just declined to prosecute, Harris said, no, we're going to prosecute these as felonies, end quote, he said, attributing the change to a desire by police to crack down on drug dealers. Other activists point out that marijuana convictions still impact defendants' lives even if they are not incarcerated. Quote, just because you didn't rot your life away in prison doesn't mean it wasn't a big deal to get a conviction, end quote, said Dale Sky Jones, a Bay Area marijuana activist. Your ability to keep your job, get another job, or get housing with that conviction on your record is all hurt by that, end quote. None of the marijuana convictions Harris' office secured are still on the books. None of the marijuana convictions Harris' office secured are still on the books. Her successor, as DA George Gascon, Gascon, moved earlier this year to expunge all 9,300 of the city's marijuana convictions going back to 1975. In recent years, newly elected district attorneys in cities like Philadelphia and St. Louis have issued blanket policies vowing not to prosecute low-level marijuana possession, even though it's still legal in their states. But Kamala Harris supporters say it would be unfair to compare her work more than a decade ago to today's standards of a progressive prosecutor. Quote, "You can't look at this with historical amnesia," said Tim Szilard, who her former head of policy. "The positions she took then were quite progressive and very much out of step with her colleagues around the state," end quote. So check out, that's the other half of this article. We dealt with the first half yesterday, and it goes through and it breaks down how Harris oversaw 1,900 marijuana convictions in San Francisco. Previously reported records from the DA's office show her prosecutors appear to have convicted people on marijuana charges at a higher rate than under her predecessor, based on data about marijuana arrests in the city. It goes through and adds clarification and nuances here. It says Harris' history of prosecuting marijuana cases at San Francisco District, those base stage confrontations indicate, according to a new data group and used with a dozen former prosecutors, defense attorneys, criminal justice experts, and activists who've been following her career. It goes on to say, but former lawyers in Harris' office and defense attorneys who worked on drug cases say most defendants arrested for low-level pot possession were never locked up, and only a few dozen people were sent to state prison for marijuana convictions under Harris' tenure. And then it also deals with Representative Tulsi Gabbard on the debate stage, and Tulsi Gabbard saying that Kamala Harris put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations. Okay. And it talks about how that statement was misleading. She was citing figures for all of California while Kamala Harris was Attorney General, even though the vast majority of marijuana cases in the state are prosecuted by independently elected county district attorneys. Okay. Not Kamala Harris' office as Attorney General, but district attorneys who are elected by the people in various cities and counties, etc. So read this full article from Mercury News. It's one of the most extensive ones I've seen because I've read a lot of them, which goes deep into what's taking place. It's much different than a lot of these memes circulating around. Then also read the fact check from PolitiFact.com. Were Tulsi Gabbard's attacks on Kamala Harris' record as a California prosecutor on target. That's from August 1st, 2019 from PolitiFact.com. And they show how those attacks were misleading as well. Okay, so check that out. And then lastly here, let's look at this. This date in African American history, October 14th, 1964, Dr. King wins the Nobel Peace Prize. The African American civil rights leader, Martin Luther King Jr., is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent resistance to racial prejudice in America. Okay, nonviolent resistance to racial prejudice in America. At 35 years old, the Georgian-born minister was the youngest person ever to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Dr. King was born. Dr. King was born in Atlanta in 1929, the son of a Baptist minister. He received a doctorate in theology, and in 1955, and in 1955, organized the first major protests of the civil rights movement. The successful Montgomery bus boycott, influenced by Mohandas Gandhi. Influenced by Mohandas Gandhi. He advocated nonviolent civil disobedience to racial segregation. The peaceful protests he led throughout the American South were often met with violence, but Dr. King and his followers persisted, and their nonviolent movement gained momentum. Now, a powerful orator, he appealed to Christian and American ideas and won growing support from the federal government and northern whites. In 1963, he led his massive March on Washington, in which he delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" address. Now we talked about the "I Have a Dream" speech. Originally, it was called a canceled check. Originally it was called a canceled check, and the speech was not about a dream. The speech was about holding America accountable for its hypocrisy. That's what the speech is about. The speech was about holding America accountable for a promissory note that it gave in 1863 with the Emancipation Proclamation, and it's about calling America out on its hypocrisy. Is the march for jobs and justice, jobs and freedom. In that speech, he talked about police brutality. He talked about voter suppression. He talked about African Americans moving from a smaller ghetto to a larger ghetto. He said we can't stop while black people in the South can't vote, and black people in New York or up north feel they have nothing to vote for. He calls out police brutality, racism, and he's talking about holding America accountable for a promissory note they gave us 100 years prior. He uses the phrase insufficient funds. He said we were given a promissory note, and when we take it to the bank, it's marked insufficient funds. This is what the speech was about. The speech wasn't about everybody holding hands and getting along. That's not what that was about. That's the revisionist history. Which is problematic. Right now, in the late 1960s, Dr. King openly criticized. Well, let me back up for a minute here. This is this date in history from history.com, official website of the History Channel. So in 1964, the civil rights movement achieved two of its greatest successes: the ratification of the 24th Amendment, which abolished the poll tax, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited racial discrimination in employment and education and outlawed racial segregation in public facilities. In October 1964, Dr. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He donated the prize money valued at $54,600 to the civil rights movement. He donated all the money to the civil rights movement. Now, in the late 1960s, Dr. King openly criticized U.S. involvement in Vietnam and turned his efforts to winning economic rights for poor Americans. By that time, the civil rights movement had begun to fracture, with activists such as Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture rejecting King's vision of nonviolent integration. With that, see, this is white people saying this. So the real fight was not for integration; it's for desegregation. That's what the real fight was. People misinterpret it and think the civil rights movement was about integration. It's about desegregation. It wasn't about giving up our communities, giving up our businesses, giving up our institutions to go to white ones. It was about first-class citizenship, having all of our rights, still maintaining our businesses, but having equal rights and equal access. It wasn't about giving up what we have. This is the misconception. So it's the focus is on desegregation as opposed to integration. That was the real focus. So rejecting Dr. King's vision of nonviolent integration, they say, in favor of African American self-reliance and self-defense. What Dr. King was for Dr. King was advocated for self-reliance, but at the same time, you have to have government investment. All this is created by policies. All this is created by laws. Okay, white people didn't deal with self-reliance, because when you look at the 1930s and you look at things like the Farmers Home Administration, which gives low interest loans to farmers so they can save their farms and not lose their farms to the banks. Okay, and they can pay their employees on the farm, etc. And they're being subsidized by the federal government, and they're better able to compete against African American farmers because we're locked out of a lot of those loans we did not get, and we end up losing our farms. Well, that's not self-reliance. Okay, that's the government helping. Okay, when we look at things like the Homestead Act of 1862, which gave away about 245 million acres of land. Okay, the white heads of household, white male heads of households. They gave away land from 1862 during the Civil War up until 1988. 1988 was the last allotment of from the Homestead Act. They gave away 80 acres of land in Alaska. Well, the overwhelming majority of that land went to white people. You got white families who still have land in their family that they got generations ago from the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act gave away it was about 150 acres of land to the head of household, and you had to take care of that land for 5 years, make the improvements on it, pay the taxes on it, and the land is yours. Okay, this is the Homestead Act. Then you have the Southern Homestead Act of 1866, the year after the Civil War ends. That gives away about 45 million acres of land. We're largely locked out of that. So a lot of times people, be quite honest with you, this whole myth of black self-reliance, this whole concept of black self-reliance is largely a myth. Is largely a myth. That's a misunderstanding of history, because everybody has had help from the federal government. Yes, you're going to own a farm, things like this, but farmers get farm subsidies. Farmers get low interest loans from the banks. Okay, farmers get from the government and open markets to sell their produce. This whole concept of like science is myth. You understand history? Why? It was the federal government that whether it's Great Depression, whether it was things like the Housing Act of about 1949 that allowed white people to put 3% down on low interest loans and get houses built out in the newly formed suburbs, whether it was the redlining system in 1937 that's created by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, created about 1933, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and the redlining system is going to lock African Americans out of being able to buy homes, buy property in certain areas, okay, and not be able to take advantage of low interest loans that our taxpayer dollars are subsidizing. So this whole concept of self-reliance is largely a myth. Okay, politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. And when we go and look through this history, at basically every turn, we see government intervention either helping or hurting. Oftentimes helping white people, but either helping or hurting. And then even when we see things like after the Civil War ends, we see the Freedmen's Bureau, the U.S. Bureau of Freedmen's, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands, helping the formerly enslaved African. We see the Freedmen's Bank, even though the Freedmen's Bank is going to collapse because they didn't have enough oversight over the Freedmen's Bank and didn't finance it enough. But still, we're going to see these things. Take place when we deal with Special Field Order number 15, also known as 40 Acres and a Mule. Okay, that's government. allocating 400,000 acres of confiscated Confederate land. It was coastal land in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. They allocated that land to 40,000 former slaves. Okay, that's still government, even though President Andrew Johnson takes back the land and Johnson seated Lincoln. But all this is government. Okay, so this whole concept of self-reliance, even though, yeah, we want economic empowerment and all our businesses and things like that. Okay. But still, it's not like 100% self-reliance. That's a myth. Because when you study how white people accomplish what they accomplish is with the help of government. It's not all self-reliance. Even when we look at pioneers and we look at farmers, etc. Where did they get the land from? It was government that stole the land or bought the land that then reallocated the land. Okay, they're still dealing with government. So when we look at, say, the Farmers Home Administration, 1930. Farmers Home Administration was set up in 1930 to give loans and subsidies to white farmers to sustain and maintain their operations. So 1930 is the year after the Great Depression starts, 1929. To achieve this unstated racist purpose, the Farmers Home Administration allowed local white whites and of okay. Untold story of American white supremacy. How white folks got so rich, the untold story of American white supremacy. You can also read Black Label White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson. There are a number of books that deal with this type of information. Okay, so when we look at Dr. King, we go back to this article here. They're talking about Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas Gandhi, right? Washington Post and also AtlantaBlackStar.com has one article from the Washington Post. What did Mahatma Gandhi think of black people? This is by Rama Lakhshmiclos. And it talks about a book by two South African university professors. And this controversial book reveals shocking details about Gandhi's life in South Africa between 1893 and 1914 before he returned to India. And during his stay in South Africa, Gandhi routinely expressed disdain for Africans, says S. Anand, A-N-A-N-D, founder of Navayana, the publisher of the book titled The South African Gandhi, Stretcher Bearer of Empire. The South African Gandhi, Stretcher Bearer of Empire. Now, according to the book, Gandhi described black Africans as savage, raw, and living a life of indolence and nakedness. Savage, raw, and living a life of indolence and he campaigned relentlessly to prove to the British rulers that the Indian community in South Africa was superior to native black Africans. The book combs through Gandhi's own writings during the period in government archives and paints a portrait that is at variance with how the world regards Gandhi today. Much of the halo that surrounds Gandhi today is a result of clever repackaging, write the authors. The authors are Ashwin Desai, Desai, and Ghulam Vahid, Goolam, and they're professors at the University of Johannesburg and the University of KwaZulu Natal. They go on to say, quote, as we examined Gandhi's actions and contemporary writings during his South African stay and compared these with what he wrote in his autobiography, it was apparent that he indulged in some tidying up. Okay, he was effectively rewriting his own history. Now, prize-winning Indian author Arundhati Roy says the book, which will hit stores next month, came out in 2015, is, quote, a serious challenge to the way we have been taught to think about Gandhi. A serious challenge to the way we have been taught to think about Gandhi. Okay, can you all hear me? Now, here's a sample, and this is a good article from Washington Post. Also, AtlantaBlackStar.com has an article on this as well. Came out September 9th, 2015. New book tears apart benevolent image of Gandhi, recasts him as racist with hatred for blacks. New book tears apart benevolent image of Gandhi, recasts him as racist with hatred for blacks. That's the article from AtlantaBlackStar.com. If we look at some of the things Gandhi said about South Africans, he said one of the first battles Gandhi fought after coming to South Africa was over the separate entrances for whites and blacks at the Durban post office. It's like during segregation, separate entrances for colored and white. Gandhi objected that Indians were, quote, classed with the natives of South Africa, end quote, who he called Kafirs, K-A-F-F-I, also the term for African people. Kind of like demanded a separate entrance for Indians. Felt the dignity to demand authorities do the in this. They have now provided three separate entrances for natives, one for Asian. Now, in a petition letter in 1895, Gandhi also expressed concern that a lower legal standing for Indians would result in degenerating, quote, so much from their civilized habits, degenerating, I should say, would result in degenerating, quote, so much so that from their civilized habits, they would be degraded to the habits of the Aboriginal natives, and a generation hence between the progeny of the Indian and the natives. There will be very little difference in habits and customs and thought, end quote. Now, in an open letter to the Natal Parliament in 1893, Gandhi wrote, quote, I venture to point out that both the English and the Indians spring from a common stock called the Indo-Aryan. A general belief seems to prevail in the colony that the Indians are little better. A general belief seems to prevail in the colony that the Indians are little better, if at all, than savages or the natives of Africa. Even the children are taught to believe in that manner, with the result that the Indian is being dragged down to the position of a raw kaffir, Kaffir, the derogatory term for African people. Now, at a speech in Mumbai in 1896, Gandhi said that the Europeans in Natal wished, quote, to degrade us to the level of the raw kaffir, whose occupation is hunting and whose sole ambition is to collect a certain number of cattle to buy a wife with, and then pass his life in indolence and nakedness, end quote. Now, protesting the decision of Johannesburg municipal authorities to allow Africans to live alongside Indians, okay, protesting the decision of Johannesburg municipal authorities to allow Africans to live alongside Indians, Gandhi wrote in 1904 that the council, quote, must withdraw the Kaffirs from the location. About this mixing of the Kaffirs with the Indians, I must confess I feel most strongly. I think it is very unfair to the Indian population, and it is an undue tax on even the proverbial patience of my countrymen. All right. So check out the rest of this article here. This is from Washington Post. What did Mahatma Gandhi think of black people? Then also we can look at the article from AtlantaBlackStar.com, September 9, 2015. New book tears apart benevolent image of Gandhi, recasts him as racist with hatred for black Africans. So they have some quotes from Gandhi as well. We've also seen a number of statues of Gandhi that are taken down. We saw one, I think, last year in Ghana. We see protests in Jamaica over a statue. I think they just took down, well, they're calling for a statue to be taken down in Jamaica. FaceToFaceAfrica.com had an article about that. So, FaceToFaceAfrica.com had an article we posted dealing with that as well. I'll give you the name of that article. Remove statues of racist Mahatma Gandhi in Jamaica and everywhere in the diaspora. That's from FaceToFaceAfrica.com. And let's see here. Yeah, that article came out. That was October that came out. As a nation, there are so many painful parts of our history. It is more painful when other nations come bringing Trojan horses to our shore. The gift of Gandhi statues to Jamaica is an affront to a nation with blackness permeating the length and breadth of it. I call for the removal of this racist statue. Mahatma Gandhi was no lover of Africans. He despised black people while benefiting collectively as an ethnicity imported into Africa by British colonial masters. Throughout his life, there has been no report of his empathy for his poor, downtrodden African brothers. Gandhi was concerned only about the Indians who were originally laborers brought to Uganda, Kenya, Madagascar, Malawi, and South Africa to build primarily the railroads in those countries. Gandhi has done wonders for his people, eventually articulating independence from their British overlords. Not one time did his conscience lead him to be vocal or to be militant for those whose historical country provided him home and comfort. He was renowned for being rude toward South African blacks and to speak disparagingly of Africans, and openly a racist in all forms. Okay, so they're calling for the statue to be removed in Jamaica. All right, and this is written by Winston Donald, a former Jamaica Sunday Herald Fine Arts columnist. This is for face-to-faceafrica.com. So check this out. All right. Hey, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Okay, this helps us to, especially in this extended format where we're doing 6 nights a week instead of 1. This helps us keep doing the research and stay on the air and finance all this. Okay. All right. Look, hey, we're going to get out of here. Remember, we're here Monday through Fridays, 11 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time, and we'll go over some. And then our 2-hour show, Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, WFDF. Monday through on the radio for the hour, then I just keep going on social platforms. And then Sunday nights we're on 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. on the Superstation, WFDF here in Detroit. These shows are in audio podcast format also. Wherever you get your podcast from, search for the African History Network Show. We're on iHeartRadio, Castbox, FM Player, TuneIn, Stitcher. Also, if you go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, right on the homepage, click on Listen to Podcasts. And then we're on Blog Talk Radio, blogtalkradio.com /The African History Network Show, blogtalkradio.com /The African History Network Show. All right, look, we have to get out of here. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. Right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace.